Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. It's a new month for the markets, a fresh government shutdown. The confirmation process for the president's Fed pick, Kevin Warsh, is ahead, and the politics loom.
He has been very critical of this Fed and these board members for the last several years.
But some are optimistic about the choice, like former SEC chair and current U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton.
I like Kevin a lot. I think he's got to do a good job. He's a known quantity. He's a known quantity inside the building. He's a known quantity on Wall Street. Those are really good things.
Disney reporting a financial beat this quarter, but there's no business like show business. We get into all of it, like the company's successor to CEO Bob Iger and Netflix's purchase of Warner Brothers. Disney CFO Hugh Johnston is our special guest.
Netflix would be an awfully big company at that point if the two came together. But if you look at what they're trying to do in a lot of ways, they're trying to do, again, what we already did, which was they have the distribution. They're trying to add more IP.
Plus, it's Groundhog Day again. It is Monday, February 2nd, 2026. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Here we go. It's Monday morning. It was the last trading day of January on Friday, though, and the Dow is now up for 9 months in a row after that month's performance. You got to check out gold and silver. This has been a story to watch. Every day it seems like we've been talking about new highs until Friday, when both of those metals saw their worst day since 1980. You got to go back to the 80s to look at what was happening with the Hunt brothers trying to close in on the silver market to really see what we have seen recently. The chart tells you a little bit more of the story of what we've seen. Year to date, still up by 8%, but a significant drop off that we saw on Friday. Silver, I want to look at an even longer term chart if you can. This is year to date up 16%.
This 80 is just insane.
It was above 100.
I know that. But
it pulled back.
It's like,
there's the chart. There's a chart that shows you a little bit more. Over the 1 year, 153%. But yes, I realized I was trying to buy some silver jewelry that has not come back in stock since before the holidays.
Oh, interesting.
And I finally realized, it's because they can't restock it. It's, prices have gone completely crazy with this.
Is it asymptotic or hyperbolic or exponential? It's all those. I don't know.
Both.
Logarithmic. One of them's down. Logarithmic is.
It has not been pretty in the last few days. But again, people were taking profits. Look, they'll point to the nomination of Kevin Warsh as a reason for this, because he's never been somebody who's liked a runaway currency, and so they'll say that's part of the reason.
I think
but really,
it
was just.
Everything we're seeing Bitcoin too is about Warsh. He likes a smaller balance sheet.
Yes.
So he's talked about
selling it down. But by the way,
but assets should be based on. So if you believe all assets should actually be based on something like it, rather than liquidity, Fed, a big balance sheet, momentum. If you think that, he's probably not a guy you're going to like right away.
No, because ultimately there is a hawk. By the way, it is hawkish ultimately to be trying to reduce the balance sheet quickly. So even if he reduces the interest rate on the front end, if he can convince...
And it makes it tougher to do. You can't do both at the same time.
You can't do both at the same, or they basically, even each other out. The other piece of this, by the way, is he's going to have to, and this is something that we haven't really talked about enough. The board of the Fed, he's going to require everybody to get to vote in favor of what he wants. He has been very critical of this Fed and these board members for the last several years. So the first job of the challenge that he's got is he's going to actually have to re-befriend this group to try to get people on board. They were happier about having him in many ways than having, for example, Kevin Hassett. Yeah. But life is relative. That you're still walking into a bit of a hornet's nest, and I think he can succeed. But I'm just saying, on the front end of what he's going to have to do is going to have to be trying to figure out how do you get everybody to.
That's a long explanation. He does not like the profligacy that the Fed has enabled both fiscally and with its own balance sheet.
And there's a lot that
he can do on his
own, which include reining in the Fed's mandates that they've done, and the balance sheet. He's going to be able to do a lot of those things, regulation over the banks.
I mean, he's talked many times about, look, it'd be nice if all assets were actually trading at a point that was based on inherent value rather than liquidity and momentum. And there could be, I don't know whether that includes crypto or AI or NASDAQ or gold and silver, or it's across the board.
The pullback, though, has been pretty phenomenal, particularly with the precious metals and silver prices. Again, because we brought up the Hunt brothers, right? The run-up that came. First of all, it's used in solar panels, so there is an industrial use.
Been used
for
in
silver,
solar panels,
but it's been a little crazy.
The whole solar panel craze is we're on the downside, we're not on the upside, and it would have already gone up there. Something weird happened in both gold and silver.
Well, when the Hunt brothers did it back in the 80s,
Central
it ran
banks.
up to $50, collapsed, and it can get back to that level for 4 decades afterwards. So you wonder if you're seeing a repeat on some
a lot of
movement.
excuses.
Dollar chart is sitting just above 97 or just at 97.10. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies also hit over the weekend, as we mentioned. You can see Bitcoin this morning is relatively flat, but it's trading at 77,000, under 77,500, 77 or just at that level. Energy prices, also a huge pullback. And really what you want to watch here is natural gas. It's down 17.5%. This was more because of the cold snap and the snow that we have seen across the East Coast and much of the country. It ran up significantly last week. It's pulling back. And then you've got WTI down by about 5%. It's still above $61 a barrel at 61.86. A lot of questions about what's happening in Iran. And we'll talk more about that a little later.
The Groundhog might not even come out today.
Would you?
I would stay.
I'm not even bothering watching because I know we're getting another 6 weeks of winter.
And if it's like this winter, right? And you know what's bad? It's bad if the snow doesn't. We count on the snow to melt after you get a couple of feet. If it stays 12 degrees for a month, it's never melting, and Mamdani is never going to get it out of here. And it's black and disgusting.
But
and
here we are complaining about the fact that there's too much snow on this side. You know who's not getting enough snow? If you're a skier,
is that true?
And you're in Colorado, you're in Utah, you're in Montana,
all
of those, terrible.
I wish we could give them ours.
Terrible.
What about by mid-March?
Oh, is that where you're going? At this rate, it's not good. It is not good. I mean, it's a third, maybe in some cases, a half of what is typical. So
if it's a zero-sum game, we know where it
is they're begging.
Right.
They're begging for more winter.
If it's a zero-sum game, we know where it is. It's in Manhattan.
Phil.
Welcome to Punxsutawney. Welcome to Groundhog Day. Woo! It's Punxsutawney Phil.
Well, there's the groundhog, Punxsutawney Phil. He emerged and he saw his shadow, which means 6 more weeks of this stupid winter.
Stop the presses.
Yeah. Like I said, I knew it was going to happen before he came out. It's cold. It's even cold in here.
It's single digit. It was below.
East Coast cold, but I go back to my friends who like to ski, who think this is great.
Right. I don't like it.
Me either.
House Speaker Mike Johnson saying he thinks he has the votes to end a partial government shutdown by tomorrow. The House Rules Committee now scheduled to meet today on that. That would be the first step in the reopening process. The government partially shut down on Saturday morning, this after the Congress failed to approve a spending package. Now, what's going to happen next? Senate Democrats demanding changes to the plan that the House originally passed after 2 U.S. citizens were shot and killed by federal immigration agents in Minnesota. Now, the Department of Homeland Security funding was stripped out of the package and replaced with a 2-week stopgap funding that has to be reapproved by the House. Now, Johnson says he's not counting on Democratic support to help fast-track the plan.
They're going to separate the Department of Homeland Security bill. Our intention is by Tuesday to fund all agencies of the federal government except for that one, and then we'll have 2 weeks of good faith negotiations to figure it out.
So a whole bunch of moving pieces there.
Now, it seems like Disney theme parks head Josh D'Amaro is close to getting the nod from the company's board to become Disney's next CEO. Bloomberg Report says Disney directors are set to vote this week on who will succeed Bob Iger as head of the entertainment giant. Late last week, the Wall Street Journal reported that Iger told confidants that he plans to step down before his contract expires at the end of the year. The report said Iger wants to give up the daily responsibilities of being CEO, and that he was frustrated over the drama at ABC when Jimmy Kimmel was briefly suspended last year. He's probably frustrated with that right there, $112. It was, I don't know, when Disney Plus was going to take over the world. I forget how high we got. Well, above 200. We're going to speak with Hugh Johnston.
And Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang says that his company's potential $100 billion investment in OpenAI was never meant as a commitment, and that his company will make its funding decisions one at a time. Huang made those comments to reporters over the weekend in Taiwan. A report on Friday in the Wall Street Journal said that Nvidia's $100 billion agreement with OpenAI to help the startup train its models has hit roadblocks. The article says that talks between the two companies have stalled in the early stages, and Huang has privately criticized what he believes is a lack of discipline in OpenAI's business. He also flagged competition that it faces from Google and Anthropic, though in separate remarks over the weekend, Huang denied that he was unhappy with OpenAI and said Nvidia plans to make what he called a huge investment in the startup. Huang is going to be joining Jim Kramer in a Mad Money exclusive tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
So this one I think is a complicated one. By the way, so many people talking about it, about what's going to happen next in all of this. By the way, for those who are trying to play in the public markets, the OpenAI valuation in the private markets, you can look at the stock of SoftBank right now, which is down this morning, I think a little 3, maybe 4%. By the way, Microsoft, which is also used to some degree, it's a different animal, as sort of a backdoor way into OpenAI. But the idea that Jensen and Sam, if you remember, came on our air
to talk about
to announce this $100 billion deal. It was the first of the deals that people said looked like a round trip deal. There was always this argument being made, I think privately, that Nvidia was basically saying we're going to give $10 billion, then we'll give 20, then we'll give 30, based on a performance metric. And so now the question is, what's really even happening to that money? Is it possible that in this next round they put in 10, 20, even $30 billion? Sure. That, I think, is directionally where this is going.
Right.
Will they ultimately get to 100? Maybe, but I think that part's a lot less clear.
But we'll get some answers from Jensen himself when he speaks with Jim tomorrow.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, one of Wall Street's most entertaining questions: who will be the next leader of Disney? The company reporting quarterly results today. Chief Financial Officer Hugh Johnston joins us next, and if he knows, he's not sharing.
Whomever the new CEO is, they're getting a business that has a lot of momentum.
You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
We're learning more about the cryptocurrency business connected to President Trump's family. The Wall Street Journal reporting saying that lieutenants to a top government official and member of the United Arab Emirates royal family reached a deal literally just days before President Trump's second inauguration last year to buy a $500 million stake in the Trump family's crypto business, World Liberty Financial. This comes months before the Trump administration approved the sale of advanced AI chips to the UAE. And if you remember, the prior administration would not sell those chips to the UAE. The Journal says that deal resulted in close to $190 million flowing to Trump family entities. The White House didn't immediately respond to a CNBC request for comment, but it told the Journal there were no conflicts of interest surrounding the deal. A World Liberty spokesman also told the Journal that President Trump had no involvement in the deal. But again, there's a question about when you have private enterprise and you're in the government, what the role of all this should be. Clearly, obviously, the president's kids have this business, but President Trump is part of that business.
Right.
And then, of course, when and specifically, just to make one point on this, the issue is when you have foreign governments effectively making investments in your company. It's different if I mean, to some extent, maybe different, or at least the conflict is less.
Well, this guy, did he do it
severe
as a representative of the government, or personally, or what? The gentleman.
No, it's the government
fund.
It's the sovereign fund. It's the government making an investment in.
Because the way that the story was written, a lieutenant to a top government official, and a member of the United Arab Emirates royal family.
He was the one who negotiated the deal.
Right.
On behalf of the country.
He made the investment. No, he made the investment for the country.
I believe it's a sovereign. It was the sovereign wealth fund that made the investment. I don't want to misspeak about this, but the Wall Street Journal reporting was that, and then the question is, should that be disclosed, especially then when you're making separate deals about chips and other things?
And then you're going to, you'd have to find the quid pro quo smoking gun, probably, like all these things. That's
they would say that
Journal had a really
they would say that is the quid pro quo.
Well,
that is. They would say
that the government and the Trump White House says no, had nothing to do with that, right? What they say that there was no conflict of interest surrounding the deal. I thought the latest thing was $4 billion of crypto wealth is accrued, suppose. So this is another.
Look, whether you can find a smoking gun or not, there's the appearance of impropriety, and that's been the problem with all of these things all along.
And we won't do any whataboutisms.
Disney shares trading higher following quarterly results. The company benefiting from stronger than expected streaming profits. I want to talk about that and so much more. Hugh Johnston, Disney's CFO. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We got to talk earnings, which we'll do, and we also have to talk a little bit about the succession planning. I don't know how much you can comment on that, but that's in the news right now about who may take Bob Iger's job. But let's start with the earnings piece of this. So the streaming piece, very, very positive.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that, but let's also talk about what you're seeing at the parks, because that seemed like a bit of a more complicated story.
Complicated, but strong numbers. Overall, the company really has a lot of momentum right now, and that is what I think is most encouraging about the quarter, and I think that's what you're seeing in pre-market. 5% revenue growth is a terrific number, and it's pretty broad-based. Parks, streaming, even total entertainment grew revenue 7%, so certainly feel good about that. The two big monetization engines, streaming and experiences, both growing profits strongly and well ahead of consensus. And in addition to that, the balance of the business is actually performing nicely. So, and on top of that, the creative engines are working well with the $3 billion movies that we had last year.
To the extent that Disney is an interesting barometer of the consumer, the reason I even was pointing out or saying it seemed more complicated, the park story.
Right.
It seemed on the domestic park story that internationally great.
Yeah.
Domestic seemed a little bit slower, and I was trying to just understand what's going on.
Well, revenue was up about the same domestic and international, so we certainly feel good about that. In terms of the operating income, there's a little bit of choppiness, but that's largely because of the investments that we're making in those businesses. So keep in mind, we launched the ship in Q1, and we still grew profits 6% in the quarter in experiences. We're going to launch another ship now in Q2, and we're opening up Disneyland Paris, the world of Frozen, and a lot of other attractions. There's a one-time cost attached to that. So the back half is going to be stronger for sure, but the fact is the business has good momentum right now.
In terms of the streaming piece of this, streaming versus linear, right now that's the other big sort of question.
Right.
You guys have always argued you need the linear piece to drive some of the content that lives in streaming.
Yeah.
Does that still hold?
Yeah, very much. I tend to think of it as just two distribution channels for largely the same content. So consumers are going to shift as they choose to shift. And when they do that, we'll be there to catch them. So whichever way they want to go. I know you all are a subject of the split. We don't think that strategy makes sense. But it's an interesting one because
Warner Brothers is doing the same thing right now.
Yeah, they are. So no, we feel good about the integration that we have at this point. And Warner Brothers may or may not do that, depending on how the deal works out.
And you think the linear piece is a drag on the business or no?
I just think of it as one channel. And as consumers are making the shift, obviously it affects the numbers. But in totality, we feel good about it.
You said it doesn't make sense for Disney. Do you think it makes sense for Comcast and Versant? Does this make sense for Warner Brothers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try to comment on what everybody else's strategy is. I like where we sit. I like the hand that we've played. Even if you look at some of the evolutions that are happening in the business right now with Warner Brothers on the market, we really did that back in 2018 when we did the Fox deal, and before that Pixar and Lucas and all of the acquisitions.
Do you have a perspective on the buyer, though, of Warner and what that ultimately means to the film business, for example, meaning the theater business and the like? Would you prefer Paramount as a buyer? Would you prefer Netflix as a buyer?
I wouldn't say we have a strong preference one way or the other. That said, I do think the government is going to weigh in pretty heavily on that.
But the Department of Justice is going to call you.
Yeah.
And they're going to ask you to weigh in and say, do you think that one is better than the other for your business?
Yeah, and when they call, we'll share that news with them.
But so you do have a preference?
Well, we'll take a point of view at the time. I would say this: Netflix would be an awfully big company at that point if the two came together. But if you look at what they're trying to do in a lot of ways, they're trying to do, again, what we already did, which was they have the distribution. They're trying to add more IP, which is something they said they didn't need, but evidently they do.
In terms of your spending on entertainment versus on the streaming side versus sports rights, how do you see that going forward?
I think we'll probably continue to see an escalation slowly in both. We're at about the right levels. Sports are going to continue to get marginally more expensive, although I think we're through the worst of the inflation in sports. And then from a streaming perspective, I think you'll see us internationally continue to invest a little bit more. In the U.S., I think we have plenty of content. I think we're in a good spot.
Can we talk Succession?
I'm not going to offer much. I mean, if we can keep it between the four of us, sure.
Just between. Well, look. The news reports suggest that Bob, as in Bob Iger, may want to step down earlier than the contract is finished, effectively, which means something will happen sooner. Yeah. And that Josh is the likely successor.
Yes, I've seen all those news reports as well.
And that Dana is not, for whatever reason. I'm just reporting what the report said.
Telling me that's a very good summary, Andrew. Hey.
It is an excellent summary of what's been reported in the news. Here's what I would say, Andrew. I think the board has really been very transparent about this process. I also think they've been very diligent. James Gorman and the entire board, I think, have spent an enormous amount of time on this. Right. They previously said they would make a decision in the first quarter, and they're going to, in my estimation. The one thing I do want to add, though, is whomever the new CEO is, they're getting a business that has a lot of momentum. If you go back to what Bob said a couple of years ago in terms of the studios and turbocharging the parks and making streaming profitable, all that stuff has happened, and that's why you see the good results right now.
Maybe I could put it in this context.
Yeah.
Given now that, you were at Pepsi, you're now at Disney, you understand the skill sets that effectively are required to run a business of this magnitude. When you look, just take the names off the table.
Yeah.
There was a view that if you knew theme parks, you didn't know the entertainment business. This was what people used to say. And if you knew entertainment, you might not know the theme parks in the same way.
Right.
A, what do you think of people who say that? And B, when you think long term about whatever you think Disney looks like, which of these businesses is ultimately going to be powering the company?
I think they're both really important businesses. And the reality of it is, when you have a new CEO, they rarely have all of it anyway. So I think we're fortunate that we've got a couple of really terrific candidates. And whatever the board chooses, I think the team will actually rally around that person, and the company will continue to perform really well.
I mean, if you got a really good theme park guy, if he ascends to the head of the company, you got to find a really good theme park guy. You already had a really good theme park guy. Who knows if he's any good at running all the other stuff? So I don't know. It's tough. I don't envy
But think about it, Joe. That's true in almost any company, unless they have a single
theme park has
business.
anything to do with all the other.
But the IP.
Think about Jesse with
I know.
AWS.
I mean, I understand. You create content and then you make a ride based on it or something. But that's
It's pretty powerful, actually. That's what drives all the upside. Is all that IP.
Let me ask about the theme parks very quickly, though. There is a question about attendance there. It was down in the September quarter.
Right.
Is that
but up in the quarter we just ended.
Right, but is that a reflection of new theme parks from Universal and others down there? Is that a reflection of the American consumer? Where do you see people?
I don't think it's much about the American consumer, Becky. We talked about Epic, the new park down there, and it's a good park, and frankly, we planned for it to have a bit of an impact, and it's playing out pretty much exactly the way we expected. So from that standpoint, no particular surprise. The American consumer, I would characterize it as the upper 6 deciles, which are the ones that are kind of most relevant to coming to Disney parks, are still doing quite well, and they're still spending on those types of things.
Yeah.
It is and it isn't, though. Compare it to going to a Knicks game, all right? And that's a couple of hour event. Even compare to going to the movies right now, it's a few $1,000s, but it's a week-long vacation. So from that perspective, I think the value is actually pretty good. And the fact is, the feedback we get from the people who go, they love it. And the people who go to the cruises,
It's 28
they
degrees.
really love
It's
it.
28 degrees in Orlando.
Right.
Let me ask you
a different
That doesn't help.
Let me look at the
But California is
dailies,
80, so.
Let me ask you a different question about the consumer right now. There is a big question mark right now about employment in this country,
Yeah.
and whether we are about to hit some kind of inflection point with unemployment.
Yeah.
Whether you think it's AI or something else, and we could talk about AI as well.
Right.
Do you fear that? I mean, you saw the number of companies, even in the last week, that were laying off employees.
Yeah.
And what you think that portends for either folks buying the streaming service, going to the theaters, going to the parks. What does that look like to you over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen is Disney tends to power through those things reasonably well, because the priority in terms of a vacation is something, obviously if you're out of work for an extended period of time, that's a challenge. But for most people, they will prioritize a vacation, and particularly a Disney vacation is a high priority for families. And let's face it, once you tell the kids you're going to Disney, you're probably not
That's
going
on
to
the high
reverse
end.
that
Do you
one.
think that you're going to see more moving around on streaming, for example?
No, I actually don't. Streaming is still a relatively good bargain in my estimation compared to what people used to pay for cable. So if you think about cable and you think about having 3 or 4 television sets in your house, the cost of that relative to the cost of a couple of streaming services, streaming's cheaper, and it's actually better because you get to choose what you want to watch and when you want to watch it.
And then let me ask you, since I mentioned AI, some people think that that is powering, or at least adding to some of this unemployment question.
Yeah.
When you think about the next year and hiring and how you guys are using AI, what does that look like to you?
It hasn't affected hiring at all so far. I would tell you that. In addition to that, the way we think about AI is basically making our people more productive and actually more creative and building more and better products. Not really about employment at this point. And honestly, I do think right now there's a lot of talk about AI connectivity to jobs. I'm not sure that's exactly true yet. I think it may be more the fact that people are hiding a little bit behind AI for some of the things that are going on in the job market. You know, if you go back to the old statement, technology tends to get overrated in 2 years and underrated in 10 years. AI may fall into that bucket.
Is there a model that you're using over at Disney right now?
We're thinking about it from 5 perspectives. Number 1 is managing the streaming product. Number 2 is managing the guest experience. Number 3 in the parks. Number 3 is managing labor. Number 4 is video creation and production. And then number 5 is, I'll call it the office.
But so you have a partnership, for example, with OpenAI
We do.
For some of the characters and things that people can use.
Correct. Over 200 of them, actually.
But longer term, does that mean that OpenAI is your model of choice that powers all of the 5 things you just discussed? Or are you using Anthropic for certain things? Are you using Gemini for certain things?
We're very open on it right now. So we'll have a period of time where we're going to work exclusively with OpenAI, but it's a relatively short period of time. I think the reality is for a company like us, we need to let the models play out because it's not clear. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were multiple models rather than a single model going forward.
Okay. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you.
As always.
Next up on Squawk Pod, we are joined by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and former SEC Chair Jay Clayton. How he sees President Trump's nominee for Federal Reserve Chairman, Kevin Warsh, after months of uncertainty.
Look, Kevin's a super smart guy. He knows that the balance sheet, the rates, reserves, they're all related in terms of what that means for ease or tightness of financial conditions. I think he'll be a very good communicator.
This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Stand Joe by in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, his mic, cue.
Good morning and welcome back to Squawk Box, live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. Treasuries, after the announcement last week and then reports about Trump making, I don't know, a joke about suing Kevin Warsh if he doesn't lower interest rates. It'd be funny if we could just assume it was a joke, but you just never know a lot of times with what is that suable action by a Fed chair if he doesn't lower rates? Could you actually? I think that does sound more like a joke than an actual But that does obviously put pressure on the new Fed chair. But it shouldn't have picked a guy. That should have picked someone that was going to do what he wanted if he really wanted to control the Fed.
But I go back to the idea that ultimately you have to, it's not just one human.
It's the rest of the people, right?
You have to get all these other people to
But
get on board with you. And it's
We've never
very,
said that about the Fed chair. The Fed chair has always been able to do what he wants because they all get in line because that's what he has to do.
well, so that's the interesting part. Historically, they have gotten in line, but they all had a sort of, the relationship between them was actually quite good. The relationship going into this is going to be much more complicated.
Right. Well,
That's what I'm saying is the
Jason
distinction.
Furman had a very interesting piece that he put out. He talked to several people and then actually put his thoughts down on paper.
he was complimentary.
He was. He said that
Warsh.
he is all in favor of Kevin Warsh and
Mm-hmm.
that he would not argue against him, but he did say that this is going to be a difficult thing for him to do, that he has to get in there and do all of these things, and he offered some advice along those lines. But he did say that he's happy to see Warsh in the position.
Our next guest will weigh in on the future of the Fed, the state of business in New York City, and much more. Let's bring in Jay Clayton, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, former SEC chair. Should we televise during the breaks, do you think, or put it on a podcast?
It would be must-see TV.
Even more must-see.
Cancelable. They'll cancelable.
Yeah,
Those two
there
go
may be
together.
So I'll start with, we'll talk about the Fed, but talk about New York City. Is this the ghost of Christmas future? A administration that doesn't know how to shovel snow, doesn't know how to get homeless people off the street so they don't die? I mean, are we seeing Mamdani in slow motion already, do you think?
I mean, look, this is the coldest winter that I can remember in New York.
Sounds like Rod Stewart's coldest winter
no,
in
it
almost
is.
14 years, and it was 14 years.
It was.
All right, but
and
there is black snow everywhere that has not been taken away. It's not going to melt because it's never going above 32 degrees again.
I remember living in Washington in the 90s when Mayor Marion Barry was the mayor and had no snowplows, and his comment was, "God is our snowplow, waiting for the sun." Maybe that's what we're doing.
So, all right. So you're not ready to take the lead. Well, we'll go to the Fed, but I'm just wondering. I hope this isn't a sign of you don't think so.
You know what? On this, I have great empathy and sympathy for all the folks who are doing this work, because they did a pretty great job of actually clearing stuff early.
So we could get
and
out
the
of the
biggest
way.
issue right now is just getting some of this stuff off the sidewalks. But that is actually a very hard and labor-intensive thing to do that the city doesn't
We
really
were in
have the
D.C.
infrastructure for.
and they were still, all the streets were closed because they were still trying to dig out, and it's not leaving, so you need to move it.
Yeah, let me jump in there. I'm not in sanitation or snow removal, but I am in law enforcement. And to date, and everybody asks this, would there be a change in our relationship with the police department?
Yeah.
The Fed? There has been no change to date with the new mayoral administration.
You know about
That's good news.
Yeah. You know about taking out the Southern District. You know a lot about sanitation. How about Kevin Warsh?
I think it's good we have a pick, with uncertainty of when it was coming, who it was, and I really like the pick. I like Kevin a lot. I think he's going to do a good job. He's a known quantity. He's a known quantity inside the building. He's a known quantity on Wall Street. Those are really good things.
Do you take any of the market reaction that we've seen since the pick? Do you think that is significant or signals anything? I think it signals that he doesn't like the size of the Fed's balance sheet.
Yeah, and he's talked directly about this. He's talked
about asset valuations
and reducing the size of the balance sheet. And look, Kevin's a super smart guy. He knows that the balance sheet, the rates, reserves, they're all related in terms of what that means for ease or tightness of financial conditions. And I think he'll be a very good communicator.
And you always, you're fearless, and you're a lawyer, and you're a good lawyer, so you can always talk your way out of anything. I've seen it. I've seen you do it. And
you should have seen me in high school.
So let me ask you, I should have seen you in high school. So we're talking about this UAE deal. So a sovereign fund invests in a Trump family crypto venture before the inauguration, and then after the inauguration, the Trump administration okays some chip sales to the UAE, which the Biden administration says was not going to do it. I said, you need to find the quid pro quo and the smoking gun, and I was told that is the smoking gun. It's already there. And if the Trump administration says, and I'm not saying that it doesn't look bad, or I'm not saying there's no conflict of interest, but if they say we looked separately at the security concerns that maybe the prior administration had. We have been convinced by blah, blah, blah that has been satisfied and this has changed and they have said this and this. You need to be able to prove quid pro quo before you can say it's quid pro quo, don't you?
Yes.
So is it quid pro? Can you tell me, because I was told definitively it's quid pro quo. It's right there. It's right before your eyes.
Joe, wherever we calibrate the ethics rules, there are going to be people who are not happy. But there are two things that I think are really important, and one of them is congressional trading that we've been talking about.
Now you're changing the subject.
No, I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to it. One of them is congressional trading that we have been talking about for way too long, a very solvable problem, easily solvable problem. Another one is government ethics and your family. I think we should draw the line pretty clearly that adult children, other family members can continue to do their business. Should they be subject to transparency obligations? Maybe yes, maybe no. But we can't tell people that if you go into elected office, you and all your relations have to give up their businesses. Because then we're going to greatly shrink the size of experienced people.
What if there was a wink and a nod?
Well, that's why we have transparency and people can look into it. I believe in reporting.
Here's a question for you, though. I'm curious. You said that's why we have transparency. Mm-hmm. In this case, we have transparency because the Wall Street Journal reported this news. Mm-hmm. That's why we have transparency. By the way, another great credit, not just to the Journal, but to the First Amendment and the idea that the press can do their job, hopefully.
Absolutely.
I say that in the context that there's a view right now that sometimes this administration has taken towards the media to either intimidate them from not doing their job. I mean, that is part and parcel of what is out there, at least is something that people are worried about. And I'm curious about actually how you think about that, because the transparency piece of this, it's not transparent. It was not transparent until this piece came out. And I think that the answer, this is my personal answer, is I think it would have been much better for this to have been disclosed, and then the public can make what they want of it, Congress can make what they want of it, and we can say it's fine or it's not fine or whatever everybody wants.
Look, you're going to find a person who's very comfortable with and in favor of transparency around financial disclosure, like that. So, I'm not arguing that. I think it's a very important part of being a public official is to have that kind of transparency. On the First Amendment stuff, look, First Amendment's a two-way street. The press does not get to take a view, report something, and then if somebody thinks it's wrong, say, oh, no, you're not allowed to say it's wrong. It's about public debate.
Right.
So, or if a journalist breaks the law, you can't say, hey, I'm a journalist. I can do whatever I want, right, because I don't know if that's where you were going.
The First Amendment has its limits, right?
And I've seen a lot of people, Ethan Hawke, this is a country I'm now afraid to speak up in. As he's speaking up about being afraid to speak up, it's like you're fully able to say whatever you want.
But can I say, hold on, I just want to just stop us, because we just had Hugh Johnston on, and I think we can agree with this.
What?
There was a moment earlier this year where Jimmy Kimmel said something that was horrific. He should not have said what he said, and he apologized for saying what he said.
No, he didn't. And he didn't even admit that he said it.
But hold on, and I'm not going to, but as a result of what he said, which was, I think we could all agree, distasteful. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about, distasteful.
And
but there's
right, and false.
But you are free to say, for better or worse, things that are distasteful.
Right.
All of a sudden, we got into a situation where the head of the FCC was on television, effectively threatening the network. Right. So this goes to what the issue is, and I just think we need to appreciate where we are and what's happening. That's just the context. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't know if I don't think we can agree or disagree about those are just the facts. That's what's going on. So that's why people, to the extent that some people have that view.
Andrew, everything you said, I agree with. If you're going to take away a license, there's a process that you go through, but there are reasons that you can do it. Right. I don't want to litigate that case here. But I do think that people say, oh, I'm protected by the First Amendment. If I go out and destroy a law enforcement car because I'm upset with law enforcement, that is not protected.
100%.
If you do those types of...
And look, your First Amendment right is not protected. The network can choose to fire you, but the administration threatening to use the power that they that they hold over the network to force
And
them to do
and that's
FSC.
that's a power those powers are powers that we have protections for, whether it's the administrative process, the court process, and we should all recognize that.
Here's a complicated one for you. I don't know, maybe it's not complicated for you.
We all should have some protection from government power.
Right.
So here's a question. So last week or over the weekend, Don Lemon gets arrested. He was inside a church where there were protesters. Some people,
blocking people from leaving.
And no, the protesters clearly were trespassing.
Yeah.
I believe it's probably not legal to be in there doing what they were doing. Historically, the Justice Department has not gone after quote unquote journalists who have been covering stories. In this context, it appears that they're including Don Lemon not as a journalist, but as a protester, as sort of part of the operation. And what that portends.
And there's a lot beforehand that he was on record saying, "I'm going to go do this, and that, the other thing." And I don't know.
Well,
I'm not going to talk about that specific case. It's that's not where I can go at that time. But you can't be part of what would be illegal activity. It's just a general. You can't be part of what would be illegal activity. Throw a journalist coat on and say, okay, now I've switched to being a journalist.
I have a camera
and
here
then take it off. You can't do that. You can't. I mean, law schools would have a wonderful time discussing that. Like how much participation can a journalist have? A quote unquote journalist in the planning and execution of something that's illegal.
Well, the question is if you're part of the planning and execution versus you are aware of the planning and execution and you are effectively embedded the way you might be either with the military or something else.
Or you join in.
And the question is, did he join in or not?
That's what there's.
I think what's on camera is suggestive that he was reporting on it, but there's this other perspective.
Look, that's why let people out, and I don't know. I don't know. That would all come.
I have a different one for you.
By the way, I didn't know we were going to have the
the
constitutional law quiz here today.
You've told me how the grand jury and Stormy Daniels, it's a real grand jury. We pick our grand juries and whether they're relevant or not based on our own viewpoints. This grand jury thought it was, fair game to arrest Don Lemon, right?
After two judges decided that
who knows?
said that they couldn't or shouldn't.
Right.
Same
thing with the.
And an appellate court said you should.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's super complicated. Okay, I have a different one. Epstein.
That's not what you were saying.
Epstein emails over the weekend, right? We have all of these emails. We're all trying to make sense of these emails. Some of it seems. A lot of the emails are very, let's say, unattractive.
Anonymous calls to the FBI about eating. Some of it's just snuff films, eating.
I want to say two related things, and the first is very serious, and that is victims of this type of behavior.
That's all right.
Okay, we at the Justice Department, Southern District, have spent the last 45, 50 days working around the clock, trying to make sure that victim names are redacted. Some victim names have been posted. Yeah. It's very unfortunate. We've worked over the weekend. We're trying to fix that. But we need to protect those victims for their own safety, for their own well-being. But also, it is very, very difficult to get victims to come forward in these types of situations because of public disclosure, public scrutiny, because some people put victims on trial. There is much more of this type of activity than I ever would have thought when I went to the Justice Department. We just had a guilty plea last week for a person who was very prominent in the New York community, banker. Terrible behavior. People can look it up online. I'm not going to go into it. But we need to know that protecting victims is extremely important for the administration of justice, so that we can actually have people who are willing to come forward.
Do you think, one of the things that's happened is we now have all these questions when you read these emails, and you don't know what's true, what's not. By the way, you read the stuff that was written that Epstein was writing to himself about Bill Gates with all sorts of allegations in it. You don't know whether he's a psychopath and he's writing real things, whether he's not writing real things. By the way, you see people's names. By the way, Kevin Warsh's name is mentioned in the thing next to and I don't know if it's a victim or what, but there's a redacted name next to it. And so invariably some people say, well, who's he with? What's going on here? The whole thing has opened up a complete can of worms. And I'm not saying it shouldn't. This is what the public and clearly Congress wants. But I also don't know what you think this portends in the future of how all of this gets litigated.
There are lots of reasons why people wanted this. Years of uncertainty, years of debate. But what this exercise shows, now, and the second thing I want to say is, these files are raw. When someone calls the Justice Department, when someone calls the FBI and says, I want to report a crime, you're required to take that information down. You're required to record it. Now, you don't know the veracity of that. You don't know the motivations. What you are seeing is the reason that we don't release this material on a regular basis.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Should this material have been released? And I think it raises the question of, where are the arrests? There's never been any of Jeffrey Epstein's clients who we've seen any arrests.
I don't. It should be the very exceptional circumstance, very, very exceptional circumstance where we release this material for all the reasons you're seeing. The victim protection, paramount, but there are allegations in there that with 10 or 15 minutes of work, you can realize have no basis in fact.
Right. A lot of them.
A lot of them.
And just like the craziest, space aliens. I mean, it's crazy stuff.
And to Becky's question, what I would encourage people to do is look at the internal Justice Department debates. Now, a lot of it is redacted because there's discussions of legal theories and victims, but it shows the process that the prosecutors at the time went through to decide who should or should not be charged. And it would be good that if some of the legal journalists took a look at that and gave an assessment. It's America. They get to assess whether we at the Justice Department did a good or bad job in those decisions in 2020 or
right, but you have a situation now where the public is looking at all these emails thinking, to Becky's question, why hasn't someone been prosecuted? You read through all this stuff and say, well, somebody should be prosecuted.
And Andrew, what I'm saying is, with all that information, take a look at the. There is a great deal of process inside the Justice Department when charging decisions are made. Prosecution memos are produced where the line prosecutors tell people like me, the supervisors, here are the strengths and weaknesses of the various cases. Looking at those, and you will have some insight into this. And one thing that I applaud Deputy Attorney General Blanche and the Attorney General herself is said to Congress, look, there are lots of redactions. Public can look at those redactions, but a member of Congress can come to the Justice Department with appropriate confidentiality arrangements and look at those documents. And that type of transparency, I think, is extremely important in this exercise. So as this plays out over the next several weeks, people get a chance to digest it and think, the public opinion on whether there should have been or should not have been somebody else charged or other investigations. Last thing I'll say is people are looking all over this. If there are criminal activities that have not been reported to us yet, we are very open for victims, their counsel, to come forward and point us in the right direction.
Crazy. Did you watch part of the Bannon? Did you watch that interview?
Yep.
I had never seen, I don't know, Jeffrey Epstein sort of talk and his New York accent and all that stuff. But at the end, he says, "Are you the devil incarnate?"
Yep.
And like Epstein was like, well, let me think about that. Well, what do you mean? And he was almost open to the idea of saying, yeah, pretty much. Which was just so scary to me. The whole thing is it could be a horror film, I think.
Well, I am sure there will be films. I have no doubt about that.
Right. All right.
Clayton,
thank you.
Thanks.
And that's Squawk Pod for today, this Monday. Thanks for starting your week with us. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Get the best of our TV show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. Please check out episodes of The Path with Becky Quick. That's our new series from the CNBC Cures Initiative on rare disease. There are 2 episodes out now, available in your Squawk Pod feed. That's it. Have a great day. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.